Well, good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us here at the Cibolo Center for Conservation. My name is Brittany Whalen. I am the Development Director. I work in the fundraising office, and it's been a privilege to work with Kel, our Land Director, on helping to put this event together. And I just want to thank our sponsors of this event and workshop series, Culligan Southwest and the Texas Water Company. Both have a vested interest in water and our mission, and so we want to thank them for their support. And I want to thank you all for being here. Water is a sacred resource, and so I'm glad that you're interested in learning more about how we can be active stewards of water and learning more about what it looks like here in the hill country with flood and drought and water, protecting water, preserving water. And so just thank you so much for being here. If you're interested in other ways of how you can support the Cibolo, volunteer at the Cibolo, or just be involved, I can answer any questions that you might have, or just follow us on all of our socials, sign up on our website to get the newsletter. And so again, just thank you so much for being here. And here is Kel.
Howdy, y'all. My name's Kel Hoffman. I recently started as the Director of Land Conservation here at the Cibolo a few months ago. I'm really grateful that y'all chose to come out at this time on a Wednesday night. It's really nice to see people this interested. We're going to have two presenters, Suzanne Williams and Rachel Haynes. Each are going to speak for around 25 minutes or so, and then we're going to have a question and answer session at the end. If I can ask you to maybe hold your questions until the end so that we can get you a mic so that our YouTube channel can pick up what you're asking, that'd be lovely. And yeah, that's kind of all of the logistics, and now let me introduce your speakers. Suzanne Williams is the Water Conservation Manager at the Texas Water Company and works every day to make sure growing hill country communities have a reliable and sustainable water supply. She brings a practical, on-the-ground perspective to how Texas Water Company is adapting to Texas's changing water realities. Rachel Haynes, Policy Director with the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, is deeply involved in shaping legislation and local policy to protect the Edwards Aquifer and the rivers and creeks that depend on it. Her work connects the dots between advocacy, science, and the people who call this region home. Together, they will take us through tonight's presentation. We'll get a sense of how decisions made at the Capitol ripple down to affect the springs, recharge zones, and waters that define life here in Boerne. So now, without further ado, let's welcome Suzanne Williams.
Give me just a second. There, can everybody hear me okay? Fantastic. As Kel said, I'm Suzanne Williams. I am the Conservation Manager for Texas Water Company. It is a delight for me to be here this evening, and I couldn't say no when I was invited to come talk at the Cibolo, because this is a complete gem for us to have, and I appreciate all the advocacy and the outreach that you do, so thank you very much. And I get to talk about one of my favorite things, and that's water. Oh, I did it again. Thank you. All right, for those of you who are not familiar with Texas Water Company, we are a water wastewater utility. We're located between San Antonio and Austin. We're in the hill country, headquartered in Sattler, which was more familiar known as Canyon Lake. We serve 7 counties, including Kendall County. Comel, Blanco, Bandera, Medina, Hayes, and Travis counties are our other counties. Kel, I'm so sorry. Please excuse me. To give you a visual, this is our service territory. The blue is our service territory, and our largest number of customers are in Comel County, and then you can see them throughout the rest of our service territory. I'm going to go into a little bit about our water supply to lay a foundation for some of the next slides I'll go into. Our water supply, Texas Water Company, we have a little over 51% of surface water, and that's Canyon Lake. Then we have about 40% of groundwater, and then we have about 12% purchased water. The reason this is important is because all of the utilities around us, we have obviously different water supplies, different aquifers, different rivers, different areas of surface water, purchased water. We also have a different customer type. Some have more industrial customers, residential, agriculture. And the reason I go into that is because if you have, a utility is over 3,300 connections, we are required by the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, to create a drought contingency plan. The drought contingency plan has to be renewed at a minimum of every 5 years. We most recently updated ours in May of 2025, so it's a very, very new and current. But within those drought contingency plans, we have drought stages. Drought stages look different because of those factors I just talked about, our water supply, the customer type. Not only are drought stages different, but the stages themselves are different. So for example, in Kendall County, drought stage 3 means you get to water once a week, every other week, during certain hours of the day. That is drought stage 3 for Texas Water Company. Drought stage 3 for, say, a SAWS or an NBU might look very different. They might water twice a week. They might water once a week. I don't know off the top of my head, but the drought stages look very different because if you have, say, a higher industrial base, data centers, limiting outdoor water use doesn't necessarily have the greatest impact if that is a customer base of yours. That's one of the differences you'll see. Canyon Lake is one trigger for Kendall County. The counties each have multiple triggers, and that is something we take very seriously and we monitor it very carefully. We use this slide a lot, obviously updated during our different presentations because it's very telling about Canyon Lake. If you notice the very top in the red, that's 2011. The lake is almost at 100% capacity, and it declines. Then 2023, it starts out at 80%. In 2024, 60%. And then in 2025, we started here. Each year declining. This right here is the sad weekend of July 4th. The reason I bring that up is not because we want to relive those memories, but with the abundance of rain and the devastating loss that significant rainfall that gave us, you can see it didn't recover. It wasn't enough to recover the lake, which is one of the reasons we have to be so thoughtful with how we use our water. And this isn't just the hill country, it's a challenge we face across the state of Texas. And Rachel's going to get into some legislation where you will see that the impact across the state is great. The challenge we face, it takes all of us. The state well is unique to Kendall County. You can see where it's located over there, the little blue arrow. This is a trigger for Kendall County. This is not a trigger for Bandera County or other counties. Like I said, the drought contingency plans are very unique to the water sources and very unique to their customers. This trigger here is the reason that Texas Water Company has declared stage 3. Our drought contingency plan requires us to declare a stage when a trigger is met. This is the trigger right here. It is the state well. I was very hopeful that in September, you can see we're high. I was very hopeful that we might get into stage 2, but you can see the rapid decline of that state level, that state well. But not only do we ask our customers to use water smartly, the company is doing the same thing. And I can tell you personally and professionally, that means a great deal to me. My own house, I have xeriscaping, and I have, people want to call it astroturf, but fake grass, because I want to protect the water. The water's here for essential use. Texas Water Company has made the commitment to do that internally with the company. There's drought-tolerant landscaping. There are not irrigation systems at the company. We had properties, business properties around. We are consolidating our employees into one area, so we've allowed for some renovation opportunities. We are now collecting HVAC condensate to flush our toilets. We're using rainwater to flush the toilets because we don't need to irrigate because it's drought tolerant landscaping. We are also building a vehicle and equipment wash center. We have to keep our equipment clean, but rather than take that off site to clean it, we actually built a center on site where we can recycle that water and reuse it for the next vehicle. Our parking lots are being designed with rain gardens, and what that means is that rather than when we do have a rain event, we're obviously on steep slopes. Rather than just the water sheeting off of the concrete and becoming runoff, these rain gardens actually stop the water and allow it to go into the ground and recharge and percolate. So we really are trying to make every drop count from an internal standpoint as well. One of the other things we're doing is non-revenue water. And basically what non-revenue water is, it's water that we pump, we treat, we process, we put it in the pipes to send it to the customers, but it doesn't make it to that end customer. That may be, it's a leaky pipe, it could be a break, it could be operational. Because operations do require firefighting, firefighters must flush the hydrants for firefighting purposes. TCEQ requires us to flush the mains for water quality purposes. So some of it we have to do. The industry average is 15% of water loss. Well, we have achieved 8.91% because we're fixing those leaky pipes, we're having strategic leak detection programs, but we also want to take it a step further. We're looking at equipment because we can't stop flushing for water quality. So we're looking at equipment that will allow us to flush the pipes and then recycle that water. So we're trying to lower that even more.
What is SAWS? Do you know what SAWS is?
No, sir, I don't. You may have all been aware, it made YouTube and it made all the social media channels, it made our president famous, but she issued a letter to developers because it's one tool that utilities have that some governing entities don't have. So in unincorporated areas, like a lot of our customers are, the county commissioners would be that regulating body authority. They don't have a lot of tools to manage growth. So what Texas Water Company did as a utility company, we have basically called WUSAs. They're basically a water use service agreement. And so what we have to be able to say is, yes, we can provide water. Well, we looked at our water situation, and we looked at our customers and said, we need to put some brakes on this to make sure we can serve our current customers, because that's where it's at. The developer comes in, builds the house, and then leaves. It's our current customer here. We want to keep providing resilient water to every single day. So we stopped accepting all new development. There's not any new development in the pipeline. And furthermore, to take that a step further, we have redone our development agreements. These are what utility companies have as tools. And so when Texas Water Company decides or is able to accept new development, those developers will have to build under the new development agreement. They have much more tools in those water development agreements, such as less sod, just basically more water conservation tools those developments are going to require. And here specifically to Kendall County, getting into a little bit of the legislation, state bills, for Storm Uri, and if you were here during Storm Uri, that is not a storm we are ever going to forget. Senate bill was a product of Storm Uri, and it requires utility companies to have an emergency preparedness plan. Those plans incorporate generators, backup generators, so we don't go through what we did during Storm Uri. So these are two finished generators here for Kendall County, Ranch Drive and Ranger Creek. We completed some last year. We have some still in progress this year, and we'll complete some next year. Once we complete those projects, Bernie will have 100% redundancy on our system. And then I wanted to just touch on these last 3 bits of legislation that I think you'll find interesting, and they relate very close to the utility companies. Senate Bill 2662 passed this year. State legislation, water was a big topic because Texas, we have a challenge, and it really does take all of us. So this bill is actually quite shocking to some. Senate Bill 2662 allows utility companies to disconnect water service for violations to the drought contingency plan. And again, some people find that shocking. From a utility perspective, I find it a very helpful tool. Some utility companies have fines, but other customers have very deep pockets where the fine just doesn't matter. And just because somebody can pay the fine doesn't mean they should be able to waste the water, because the water is very important for essential use. And so this was a Senate bill that passed this year. Another House bill that passed this year was for homeowners associations. If you are not watering your yard because you're under drought restrictions and so your yard goes brown, which a lot of covenants require the green, lush lawn, your homeowners association cannot fine you. If you're following drought restrictions and as a result, your yard is not following their covenant, but you're following drought restrictions, they can't fine you for that. They also cannot make you install new landscaping, new sod that requires water under the drought restrictions. And then one code that's also this is a Texas property code. It's a property code that basically protects you as a property owner and your right to install drought-tolerant landscaping. So our property owners are given some rights back through this state's legislation, the property code here in Texas, that allows the property owner to protect water. And with that, Rachel's going to go in detail for state, so I think you said hold questions till the end? Okay.
Okay. So let's see, Kel, which? Perfect. Good. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Like Kel and Suzanne said, thank you for joining us. Really happy to have you all here tonight as we talk about such an important topic. I'm going to be focusing on what happened in the 89th regular and first and second special sessions. Hopefully there's not a third. And then I'm going to be talking about what's next for water in the Hill Country and in the Edwards and Trinity Aquifer region. First, who am I? I'm the policy director at the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance. We are a nonprofit located in San Antonio, but representing 21 counties throughout the Hill Country region with 62 member groups, all in an attempt to advocate for best management practices and responsible policies and good science related to the protection and preservation of the Edwards and Trinity Aquifer and their watersheds in the Texas Hill Country land. So Suzanne and Kel talked about this a little bit. Suzanne got into a lot of the issues that we're facing in the region, especially related to sort of the middle part, Comal and Kendall County. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's facing the aquifer region as a whole. So the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, the reason we're greater is that we try to protect both the Trinity and the Edwards because they are so interconnected and you really can't separate the two in the region. On this map here, you'll see the contributing, recharge, and artesian zone of the Edwards Aquifer. So this is really the whole Edwards region. But then our greater part of the region is that light brown that even goes up under in this peach color under the pink. That's the Trinity Aquifer. That's the area that we focus on. Well, this area of the state is facing some issues that all of the state is facing, but maybe in some instances in a little bit more intense or in its own unique way. So the Hill Country region, the Edwards and Trinity Aquifer region, as Suzanne talked about, is facing some pretty dire drought conditions. It's honestly, in some sense, when you look at a drought map and you compare it to earlier in the summer, it does look better drought-wise because of those rains we got in the middle of July. However, we are still going into, I think it's the 4th year of very serious drought. And as Suzanne showed, those water levels just keep declining year over year and then within the year themselves. So the Trinity Aquifer is in stage 3 and stage 4 in various groundwater conservation districts. In the Edwards Aquifer, we're in stage 4 and stage 5, depending on where you're at. In all of these, it's just the very deep drought, very low levels, not a lot of recovery after those floods. Canyon Lake recovered after a little, not recovered all the way, but it recovered some water elevation after the floods. The aquifers did not recover any elevation at all. It all went into the surface water system. That's, in a sense, good because it didn't pollute the aquifer, it didn't have any water quality issues, but we did not see any relief after those floods. So we're facing drought. We're also facing floods at a rate that maybe the rest of the state, or an intensity that the rest of the state does not face. So the same exact region is exactly where Flash Flood Alley is. So we have to think about that. Well, we're facing drought, we're facing floods, but we are also the fastest growing part of the state, and in many instances, the country. So this is the map from 1992. The pink and the red you see here, that's development. Impervious cover, varying levels of intensity of development, but you can just think of the pink and the red as development. 1992, 2019. Facing a 4th issue, though, on top of those other 3, is that it's also very hard to respond to those 3 issues in Texas. Texas is a proud property rights state, and in many instances that's very good, and we should value and treasure that. It also makes it, in many instances, difficult to enact the sort of measures that we need to protect our watersheds and our lands. City governments in Texas do have a lot of leeway. They have a lot of room to maneuver and enact water quality ordinances, watershed protection ordinances, impervious cover limits, strong development codes, strong development and building code standards, floodplain standards. County governments do not have anywhere near that same level of authority. They have very, very, very little authority in the state to enact any of those measures that could protect land use, and water. The problem is, in 2023, the legislature passed a bill that said in the extraterritorial jurisdictions of cities, a bubble around the cities in which cities prior to 2023 had authority to regulate for watershed and development and things that would protect the health, safety, and quality of life of residents. In 2023, the legislature said if there's properties in that area, they can withdraw themselves and go under county authority, which means that there would be no regulatory authority over those properties. Well, that's a problem in the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone. I don't know how it affects the rest of the state. A lot of these bills came out of the Houston area. It might be very helpful in Houston. In the Edwards Aquifer region, these ETJs pretty much make up the recharge zone. Well, if all these properties start pulling themselves out of these colorful bubbles on the map, but the ETJs in real life, that means all of this area on the recharge zone could potentially start being less regulated, less protected than we saw before 2023. So that's one of the other issues we're looking at. So we have droughts, we have floods, we have population growth, and then we have limited regulatory authority. And so that leads to organizations like mine focusing on a lot of different priorities that you normally wouldn't think of when you think of an environmental group or an aquifer protection group, and that's because all of these various subject matters are involved in responding to those 4 threats to the aquifers and the watersheds. And you know, when I'm talking to legislators, I'm like, it's not just the environment and it's not just climate change, and don't think about that because I know they don't want to. It's the fact that over 2 million people rely on these water sources, and if we don't protect them, that's 2 million people in the state that all of a sudden are having to scramble for other water supplies or seeing their rates increase drastically. So we focus on all these. This is just a snapshot of the bills that we supported and we're monitoring and testifying on. Thankfully, our opposed list was much shorter, which is a rare instance for us, but a happy surprise. So we had those priorities. We were working with the legislature. We're testifying. We're getting our 62-member groups to go up and testify. We're working with groups like the Cibolo and other organizations, and we actually came out of the 89th session this year very pleasantly surprised with how many good bills passed. And that's good to GIA. Some people might not like some of them or the other, but on the bills that we supported, we classified those as good bills, and we're very glad to see them passed. The biggest two, and I'll talk about them at the very end, are Senate Bill 7 and House Joint Resolution 7. These, if you've been paying attention to water news lately this summer, are the big water bills that you've heard of. That Texas had a water session, it had a lot of successful water bills. These tend to be the bills that people are talking about. So Senate Bill 7 is what's called enabling legislation, and it sets up the definitions for where the new funding can go. It sets up the types of projects that can receive funding, the new funds or the added-in funds that can receive funding. But it needs House Joint Resolution 7 to pass for anything to go into effect. So House Joint Resolution is what was enabled, and it's the mechanism that actually provides the funding. If third step happens, we all vote for it in November. So I'll get more into that later. We were delighted to see and worked very hard on this bill along with a lot of other groups in the state, industry, water groups, I'm sure Texas Water Company was there, other environmental groups, pretty much everyone in the state wanted to see this bill passed. 50% of the funds would go to existing programs under the Texas Water Development Board. So this is things like aging infrastructure, which Suzanne talked about. We definitely need to fix leaking pipes and aging infrastructure in the state. Other normal funds like technical assistance and grants and loans that are already existing would see an influx of money. Part of that 50% of funds would also go to the new water supply fund for Texas, which was established in the prior legislative session in 2023. These would be things like aquifer storage and recovery, water reuse projects, desalination of seawater or brackish groundwater, new reservoirs, anything that's classified as new water supply that's not already in the system. It also, for the first time, added wastewater reuse and wastewater infrastructure projects, which I think is a big step forward in recognizing that it's all a cycle, it's all the same water in the system. And then the House Joint Resolution, which again I'll get into later, will provide $1 billion of funding every year for the next 20 years, starting in 2027. So $20 billion in total. That is awesome. We need 157 billion, but we're going to take 20 billion if that's what they'll give us. So what else happened in the session? Groundwater conservation districts had a great year, a banner year, and all of us who rely majority on our groundwater should be very excited that they saw these bills passed. The first one, I'm not going to go into all the bills on all these slides because that would take us all night, but the first one I think is really helpful in our region because it would require, when there's a new permit for new production or export of water, for them to look at whether that new permit would unreasonably affect what are called exempt wells. Exempt wells are those wells you have on your property or your ranch. It's the domestic wells for your own household purposes or your livestock on your ranch or your home or your large property. Up until this bill passed, all of that water use was not accounted for when a new permit was being considered, which that's what the vast majority of water is used for, and it wasn't being taken into account. So groundwater conservation districts couldn't say, oh, there's not enough water because look at all these exempt wells. They couldn't consider that, or they didn't think they could. Now they can, and so now there's going to be a much better understanding of whether these new permits can reasonably go into effect. The other one sets higher penalties for rules violations. I think a lot of us heard about what's going on with Aqua Texas and Dripping Springs and the huge violations that are occurring that are drawing down Jacob's Well. There's a lot of lawsuits going back and forth and heavy penalties being set, but like Suzanne talked about, some people, if they have the money, the penalties aren't really a deterrent. Well, hopefully the state's saying maybe we can set higher penalties and those will finally be a deterrent. Or we can look at different definitions for what's considered a violation to try to stop that pumping, over pumping. So groundwater conservation districts are a little bit more protected as of right now than they were in January, which is a good thing for all of us who rely on groundwater. The next is that local utilities and local governments got a little bit more authority or a little bit more clarification on what they can do to conserve water. Like Suzanne talked about, we saw, and we're really delighted to see House Bill 517, where HOAs can't put you between a rock and a hard place of whether you pay the utilities fee or you pay the HOA's fee. That's not a problem anymore. Senate Bill 2662, where investor-owned utilities, now they have the clarity and the guidance that they can enforce their drought contingency plans. House Bill 29 is going to go a long way towards your question about SAWS. Large utilities will now have to undergo water loss reporting, auditing, and mitigation, which they weren't required to do prior to this year. SAWS is 20% water loss, so it's real bad. So a lot of these large utilities, they're really trying to go after the 5 largest utilities in the state to make sure that they understand how much water they're losing and then to actually mitigate it, which hopefully those $1 billion can help. State agencies got some more clarification to help them protect our water supplies. House Bill 3333 is a very niche bill, but it hopefully sets the stage for bigger things to come. It prohibits direct discharge of wastewater effluent into the Devil's River, which is classified as a pristine stream. Our hope is that other pristine streams in the state in the future can have similar legislation. So the Blanco, the San Marcos, the Guadalupe River, hopefully those can be next in subsequent legislative sessions. Another one that we were really happy to see was Senate Bills in 1967. In a region where we're either in a drought or we're flooding, this bill would let flood infrastructure projects detain that flood water and then use that flood water for subsequent water supply, which prior to this bill, it wasn't clear that they could do legally. And then Senate Bill 1 was, this is a proud moment of mine, we got this passed and from start to finish, drafted it, got it all the way through. This would require Texas Water Development Board to implement a study to see whether quarries, limestone quarries, could technically and economically feasibly use wastewater, recycled wastewater, so water reuse, instead of pumping from the groundwater. In Comal County, quarries, aggregate production operations use around 20% of the Edwards Aquifer supply in Comal County, of the groundwater supply. So we really want them to look at if there's got to be a better way, and so we're hoping Texas Water Development Board will help them along with that process. Unfortunately, it wasn't all good news. There were some bills that we strongly opposed that did end up passing, but not as many as we expected, so that was good. The first, if any of you have heard of produced water, this is not an issue that's impacting Central Texas yet. It's going to be a big issue in West Texas first, but we are near the Eagle Pass Shale and all of that, so it will come our way eventually. This bill preemptively shields produced water suppliers from any liability for the harms from their produced water. So before anything even happens, it says you're not going to get in trouble if anything bad happens. Produced water is the water that comes up out of the fracking well with all of those chemicals and solvents and salts and things. And this bill says the state wants us to reuse the produced water for manufacturing and industry and agriculture, hopefully someday is what the state wants. And it's saying in order to do that, we need to preemptively shield these producers from any liability from the harms that could be caused from this produced water. Well, that's very scary to us. We're not huge fans of that bill. The one upside was it said that TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, did at least have to make rules for how to treat produced water. So that was a silver lining in the bill. We're glad to see there will be some guardrails, but it is concerning when there is anytime anything is preemptively shielded from liability, it gives you cause to wonder why that is. House Bill 2559 is pretty concerning to us in our region, again, talking about drought. It limits a city's ability to impose a development moratorium, even in the case of a water shortage. So this would impact a city like Blanco, had imposed a development moratorium because Blanco said we don't have enough water. I don't think this is retroactive, so there's nothing that's going to harm Blanco now, but the state saw that and said, whoa, we can't be doing that. We can't be putting in development moratoriums. And unfortunately, they didn't think about water shortages, and this bill passed. So this is going to be something we go back and see if they are willing to put in a clause that says, except in the event of a water shortage. And then Senate Bill 1883 would require a supermajority vote for a city to be able to put in an impact fee. An impact fee is what a city implements when new development comes in. It's meant to pay for the infrastructure and reduce the impact on existing residents. Right now, it's just a simple majority vote. This would make it much harder, and then it would freeze the impact fee, which just gives cities less power and being able to incentivize responsible development. But that was kind of it for the bad bills. There's some other ones that aren't necessarily relevant to this group, but again, not happy to see those. Could have been far worse. There were some bills that we were really excited to see that made it almost to the finish line, didn't get over the finish line, didn't pass. We're going to do our best to get these back in 2027 in the 90th session. The first one would have created a groundwater science research and innovation fund under the Texas Water Development Board. Groundwater science, it's difficult, it's hard, it's under the ground, it's hard to do things, but so much of our state relies on groundwater that we really need to be at the cutting edge of any modeling and data analysis and understanding of where we are. This would have created a fund under the Texas Water Development Board, which would have been a recurring, ongoing thing that could have been stood up for many years. It failed, but Senate Bill 1 did allocate $3.5 million for the next 2 years for similar projects and programs and research efforts, so $7 million in total. That's really good. Unfortunately, it's not an existing ongoing fund, but it's a start, and hopefully positive efforts that come out of this will make the case for having an ongoing fund. House Bill 1730, would have loved to see it. It would have studied the impacts of PFAS, those forever chemicals, on our water supplies and how they're affecting our public health. It's a huge issue up in Johnson and Hood counties. It's going to be an issue throughout the state. Would have loved to see this bill. It got really close to passing, so I'm hopeful that we'll see it pass in the next session. And then House Bill 13, I think a lot of us have heard about this bill because of the missed opportunity and the tragedy that resulted in July. House Bill 13 would have established a grant program for counties to implement emergency warning systems. Now, would it have been in time for the July 4th floods? Almost certainly not, because it wouldn't have gone into effect until September, but it's just the optics of it and the missed opportunity is really tragic and unfortunate. Thankfully, we did see some movement on this in the special session. Water conservation, there's a lot of bills that would have been really good for utilities, cities, and counties, and municipal utility districts to help conserve water in the state that unfortunately didn't go anywhere. We're going to try to bring them back again. The biggest one for us was that in the Hill Country, the top 2 bills would have allowed municipal utility district permits and new projects in Hays County to have to meet higher conservation standards before they could go into effect. Just with the growth in Hays County and the Hill Country District, this would have been really helpful. And then Senate Bill 1855 would have applied statewide, and it would have required Texas Water Development Board for the first time to actually lay out what evidence of groundwater supply means for new permits. Right now, if the county is a majority groundwater county, the development has to say, we have evidence that there's enough groundwater, but the state doesn't actually lay out what that means. And so this would be the first time the state could say, these are the things you have to meet to have credible evidence of a groundwater supply before you can put that development in the ground. I think, this is Senator Perry, I think he'll bring it back. And then we had 3 bills that passed both chambers, were then vetoed. These, again, I think are efforts that, even though they were vetoed, I think they will be brought back because when the governor vetoes a bill, he has to explain why he vetoed. If you can get around the explanation or respond to it and say, we hear your concerns, here's the new iteration of it, this is what we want, there's a chance you can bring it back. So these were good bills for groundwater conservation, and I don't think I need to get too in them because they're a little bit in the weeds, but we'll try again. Oh, yeah, one of them that was vetoed did pass in the special session. I'm not going to get into all of these. These were opposed bills that we opposed that did die. These are definitely coming back, so we will be fighting them again. Some of them were filed again in the special sessions, even though they weren't even on the call. So these are bills that are some passion projects for some senators and representatives out there. One of them, which I think is really the only one I need to get into today, just because it's crazy and it's fun to talk about and how crazy it is. It would have restricted counties from governing the safe, orderly, and healthful development. It just struck through that line of the code, which to us was just wild. So it would have really, counties already don't have regulatory authority. This would have bottomed out counties' regulatory authority in the state. And so that's one we know is going to come back, and we'll be on the lookout to watch for it. And then there were some water conservation bills that we were very opposed to. I think, again, the only one I really need to bring up here is one that probably, if any of you live up in Hays County, you would have heard of. It's House Bill 2812. This bill would have exempted significant amounts of water, anything that was classified as public water, from any of the groundwater district's regulations. Really what this bill would have done is would have let Aqua Texas pump as much of it as it wanted with no oversight. That was the point of this bill. Thankfully, it failed, but it will come back. That was all in the regular session. And then we had 2 special sessions, and I'm going to go really fast because I know we're short on time. But the special sessions were flood sessions. They really were, there were lots of other things, a lot of other political items, but for our intents and purposes, they were flood sessions. And we saw some helpful bills come through. A lot of these, in our opinion, could have been a lot more stringent, but there's starts. There's steps in the right direction, and if we can build on those, we'll be in a much better place as a state. House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1, these are the camp safety bills. These are the bills we probably have most heard about in the news. House Bill 1 really relates more to the youth camps, so it prohibits them going forward from putting any cabins or permanent structures in the floodplain. It has a lot of rules and regulations and penalties if they don't meet those. Senate Bill 1 is more of the general camps, so it includes youth camps, but it also those RV parks and those residential camps. It prohibits any of those buildings from being in the floodways, which is a little different than floodplains, but still both really important. Same thing, more rules and regulations and penalties if they decide not to meet them. Senate Bill 3, those are those funds for disaster early warning system. That's the reiteration of House Bill 13 that failed to pass. Senate Bill 5 is other funds for other early warning systems, some funds for the camps to be able to meet those regulations, and updated funds for weather stations and meteorological stations. So hopefully we can catch these things before they happen next time. But unfortunately, those were all good. I think those are all reactive bills. Those are all bills responding to the situation, which is important. Very few of those bills will prohibit or prevent what happened from happening again in the same sense. A lot of the people that died were at camps. A lot of the people weren't. And so there's things that we need to do, low water crossings, prohibiting housing and subdivisions from being in those floodplains. There's a lot of things that we can do we're never gonna stop the floods. The floods are gonna happen. We're in flash flood alley. They've happened time immemorial. They're gonna keep happening. But we can get people out of the way of danger. And these are the bills that really would have gone the most, outside of the early warning system, would have gone the furthest in preventing the level of loss that we saw. House Bill 2 and Senate Bill 2 would have just been absolutely amazing to see. It's really unfortunate they failed. These bills would have helped counties and local governments and emergency service districts improve their coordination on the ground. It would have provided them funding in order to do so. A lot of the reporting that came out about the postmortems of the event said that a lot of the issues was because nobody was talking to each other. They didn't know who they should be talking to. A lot of the people were underqualified who were at the highest levels of the government. This bill would have helped that. They both failed. The other bills would have all allowed counties to actually prepare for floods in measures that they're not able to do right now. They could have, if these bills had passed, counties would be able to implement higher building standards, higher building codes, regulate impervious cover in the floodplains. It would have let them meet all of their stormwater permitting requirements in a way that they're not able to do right now. And it would have allowed them to regulate land use specifically for flood management. Unfortunately, those all didn't pass, but on the bright side, the testimony, the hearings and the testimony given, county commissioners from both Republican and Democrat counties all showed up and said, we want these bills. So I would expect that there's going to be a lot of groundswell support from local governments in support of these bills, from areas that the legislators themselves are not often used to seeing. So again, those more conservative counties came and said, we want more authority, which I think kind of threw the representatives for a loop, but it's good to see. And then in the first session, we saw four honestly astonishing bills. They weren't part of the original call, but Representative Harris out in East Texas put them up. They would really honestly radically change the way groundwater is managed in the state in a very positive direction. None of us expected to see any of these come out. We were delighted. They didn't go anywhere. The first session ended with no votes, nothing happened. But he seems committed. Other fairly conservative members and fairly liberal members are all joining together on these bills. It's really interesting to see. So we're hoping to see at least versions of these pass that would really help empower groundwater conservation districts to actually do their job and conserve the groundwater. And then finally, that farthest bill is that one that was vetoed and then brought back and passed in the special session. So next steps, while I have a captive audience, is Prop 4 on the constitutional amendment ballot on November 4th. There's 17 propositions. I only care about one of them in the sense of this room, and that is Proposition 4. Easy to remember if you all know that attorney that just waves his, 4. That's all you need to know. This is that bill that I talked about at the very beginning, that if we don't vote for this, that $1 billion every year for the next 20 years doesn't happen. It cannot happen without a supermajority, so 60% of Texans saying they want it to happen and supporting the proposition. So again, the water would fund water reuse, flood infrastructure projects, new water supply projects, and mainly fixing those leaking and aging infrastructure so that we stop losing so many gallons of water to leaky pipes. But again, those really wonderful bills that have been lauded in the press and legislators have won awards for aren't actually going to go anywhere if we don't vote for them in November. So that is all I have. I know there's a lot to throw at you. Thankfully, you have my notes. And you also now have my email. So if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call or an email.
I think it's kind of unique that we have the ability to have a free lecture series that has this level of expertise Suzanne and Rachel have demonstrated tonight. Yeah, it's just a lovely thing that we have this open to our community. So maybe we can thank them again. Yeah, so if there are any questions, please raise your hand. I'll bring you a microphone, and Rachel and Suzanne will switch back and forth with theirs.
I'm a projector.
I'll come right back. So this isn't actually amplified, this is just for our YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
So I guess my question is for Suzanne. I think it's really awesome that you guys kind of tell developers no. Are there any sort of alliances with other utility companies to prevent someone else from just coming and saying, yeah, we'll provide the water, instead of y'all?
No, we don't have that because utilities, we have basically our service territory, and once you cross that line, then you enter that other entity's jurisdiction. So they would have to exercise their own tools.
So you guys don't collaborate at all? Like, hey, we're not going to let this development go in this county, or like?
So, and you could probably speak a little more deep, but utilities have CCN, certificates of convenience and necessity, and so like that map that Suzanne showed, that's Texas Water Company's like territory.
Okay.
So if the development says we want to plat right here, Texas Water Company is the only one that can provide water right there. If Texas Water Company said no, in order for that development to get new water, they'd have to leave and go plat somewhere else. And so I can't speak to the coordination or anything, but there's no threat of being undercut by another utility as long as it's in that service area.
Okay, that was my question.
That's it. If we say no, that's it.
Oh, that's awesome.
What is the reason that counties are so hamstrung and groundwater conservation districts? It's like, let's just get after the counties and them. Why can't we change that? I know you're trying.
You can. You call your legislator up, vote. That's the best way to change. Again, Texas has such a history of private property rights, and a lot of people move to the unincorporated areas of the counties because they don't want regulation. That's not what they want to see. They move there intentionally. And I think for the most part, for our history, that's worked pretty well. If you wanted like stronger protections, you'd live in the city. If you didn't want any regulations, you'd go to the county. But unfortunately, the impacts are moving to the unincorporated areas of the county. And so the urbanization impacts, the drought, things are just changing faster than the history and traditions of our state are able to keep up. And so the reason we don't have a lot of authority is just because that's the way it's always been, and that's kind of the tradition and the way people expect, and that's the Texas ethos, right? I will say that, again, people, legislators, elected officials, county commissioners, even in the couple of years I've been doing this specific role, you see it starting to change. Those bills that would almost completely alter the rule of capture, which we think is a really positive thing, from a very conservative Republican who represents a rural part of the state. the bills that I had that we supported across the spectrum, Democrat and Republican bills, we've been talking to county commissioners a lot over the past couple of years. They're wanting to see not as much authority as the city because they don't have the staff, they don't have the financial ability to regulate at the level of the city, and they don't necessarily want to, but they want more than they have right now. They want to be able to respond to the impacts that they're seeing. So I can't exactly speak to why it's always been the way it's been, but I will say it's slowly, people are starting to realize it can't be the way it's always been. It's just going to take time, and it's going to take people talking to their legislators and making sure they know that it can't be the way it's always been.
Do you have a list of legislators that are more amenable to getting things done?
I would say for counties specifically, that's hard. I would say the best bet is always to talk to your local elected official. If they hear from their constituent, they're 100 times more likely to care about the topic or respond. I can go in their office all day and talk, and they'll listen to me and they'll hear me out. And sometimes they'll make decisions based on us and other groups. But if we walk into the office like these 6 of your constituents care about this issue, they're going to sit down and they're going to put the coffee out and really listen and take notes, and it just makes a bigger difference. And the other thing is you then ask them, well, who do I talk to? Who can I talk to about? And then they can refer you, and you just set up those relationships in a way that makes a much bigger impact. But if you have specific questions, you can email me and I'll find them for you.
I live in Cow Creek, and it's just been very, very frustrating to drive around and see people who are not good community members watering their lawns. And and
Who is
they
your representative? Do you know? Okay, well, when you
But I'll
figure it out.
find I will find it.
Yes, yes. I know if it is, I think it was Troxclair who might represent that area.
I think that's
And
exactly
we were talking in their office, and she also gets super mad. She gets very upset that people are flouting drought restrictions. So you would have a
Well, and Cow
willing
Creek
ear.
doesn't have the manpower to
No,
enforce,
no.
so that's the other frustration.
Hopefully, yes. That would be good.
Got a question over here.
Are you able to speak in all in regards to the water that's used for fracking? Is that water regulated at all by the state? Do they have any requirements to use like recycled water? I'm sure it's quite.
I do not
bit
think
of-
so. I don't really know in terms of if there's permits to withdraw. I would assume there has to be some permit somewhere, but they might not be at all. And so that's the part of that produced water bill with the preemptive liability is there will eventually be a permit for produced water if they get that far down the road of like technologically feasible. They will have a permit system, and that's part of what the bill directed is TCQ, you need to start figuring this out. And so that portion of the bill we really liked because we like to see rules and regulations and clear guidance based on science for these types of things. The part we didn't like was the preemptive shielding, but in terms of where they can draw their water and how much water they can use, I'm not sure.
Good to know. Thank you.
Suzanne, you quickly referenced a restriction or regulation at the very end about not needing to get HOA maybe approval to landscape. We've been thinking about xeriscaping, turfing our yard, and a lot of the contractors and turf companies have been asking, are we bypassing your HOA? If we bypass, then we'll get a discount from like their bid. But this was several months ago. And so are you basically saying that you don't have to have HOA permission or?
Well, there's a Texas property code, and the Texas property code gives the property owner the right to implement. Thank you. The Texas property code gives you the right to use drought tolerant landscaping. Now, I'm not suggesting you bypass the HOA, but the HOA basically can't stop you. Then the new House bill that passed, I believe it went into effect September 1st, so it's new. And so there are many HOAs and property owner associations who aren't aware of some of these. So it's not that anybody's trying to circumvent, there is just a lack of awareness because they're new. So I have worked with some of our customers and have just provided them the bills, and then they take those back to their HOA. And I can only assume they had success because I didn't hear back from them. But so if you're trying, I mean, if, on a personal note, if you were trying to, I would just suggest that route and make them aware.
Okay, talk a little bit about the elephant in the room. Lennar and wastewater plants that they're trying to build and the effect on the aquifer. And I really don't understand any of it. So could you kind of shed some light on, what tools the state has or what tools the county has to probably try to restrict that or at least limit the impact?
Yeah, I can do a little bit. Oh, I've got one still. Yeah, so the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance is actually a party in that contested case hearing against Lennar Homes and their Guajolote Ranch development. I don't think we'll be party for much longer based on where it's going in terms of the level of suit if it gets approved, and that's the end of it. And again, our technical director and our technical team is probably able to speak to this better, but I'll do the best I can. So the development permits, the wastewater permits, when they come through, they're state permits, so it's under the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. If the development took place within the city of San Antonio, then the city of San Antonio would have higher rules and regulations that development would need to meet. And SAWS would be in SAWS's CCN, that Certificate of Convenience and Necessity. So SAWS has its own rules and would just have the wastewater go into the general SAWS wastewater system. This development is in unincorporated Bexar County, however, and the county does not have those rules, and there isn't a utility, I think, existing. So it would be a public improvement district. They would create their own wastewater system and find their own water sources. SAWS may be supplying the water, but they would have to find their own wastewater system. And so the county really doesn't have a lot of teeth at all in order to influence the wastewater part of it, or the impervious cover, or the watershed part of it. As long as it's meeting TCEQ's permit rules, then the county has to more or less check the box. Counties are very hamstrung in their ability to do anything about it. If the county can sometimes get into the lot sizes and the setbacks and the thoroughfares and corridors, but that's not really an issue. It's just the wastewater in this instance. So what happens is permits can be contested. So the citizens in the area, they formed a group, and along with the city of San Antonio to start, and with Metro Health and Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance and the city of Great Forest, all got together and contested the permit. It goes through what's called the State Office of Administrative Hearing, and it works its way through what's basically the court system. It's a different type of lawsuit and a different type of court system, but it operates more or less the same. The court issues a ruling, and then it goes to TCEQ to decide yes or no on the final permit. If I have my facts right, which again, a lot of this stuff is on our website if you're really interested, or I can connect you with the guy on our team working on it, but the court ruled that the permit was good to go. So we went through the whole case process, the contested case process, and the court said the permit's fine. So then it goes to TCEQ. Where all of the pressure is right now is all of these groups are still asking TCEQ, elected representatives in the area, the cities, are going to TCEQ and saying, please deny this permit. And here's same reasons we presented in the contested case hearing. TCEQ still has the option to deny the permit. It's going to be up on the next Tuesday or Wednesday. I think the October 22nd hearing is when TCEQ will make its decision. If TCEQ approves it, then some of the groups could still then contest it out of the Office of Administrative Hearing court system and go to district court. I don't know what they'll do. I don't know whether that will happen, but that is an option. It is very likely TCEQ will approve it because the State Office of Administrative Hearing judge said it's fine, you should approve it. It's very likely it will get approved. But that is really the main option in the state of Texas, is when these permits come in, whether they're stormwater or wastewater, is real if you want to contest it. What you hope is you go to the development and say, I'm going to kick up a fuss. I'm going to drag you through the court system. Why don't you just put in a good wastewater system anyways, and we don't have to do this? The hope is that the Lennar would have just said, okay, we don't want to go through this whole process. We'll just do a good wastewater system, or we won't build here, we'll go build somewhere else. But if they stick to their guns and they say, we're doing it how we're going to do it, that's when you contest the permit. You go through the whole contested case process, which is, again, just a normal lawsuit process, just in a different court system, and then it makes its way up to TCEQ. Citizen input's very helpful. Public comment on permits is very helpful. But again, until enough citizens tell their legislatures that they want TCEQ to be stricter, not a lot's going to change. So it's going to need to come from the legislature. That's probably more confusing, but you can email me and then I can connect you with our technical director who does all of the wastewater permitting. This is just for me eavesdropping in the office. This is no expertise on my behalf.
Are there any other questions?
Hi, my question is on AI and data centers. Do you all do any regulatory work with that, or how can we get involved with that and the water use that goes with that?
So we're watching it, obviously, because those have a huge impact on the water supply. So right now we have not been approached by one. So, or we're trying to be proactive though in the industry, because what we don't want to happen is then one lands in our lap and then what do we do? Right now, Texas Water Company has exercised our agreement, the water service availability agreement, that we're not going to be accepting any developments. But we do have a team that's following the AI industry, because now there's the debate on whether to use water or putting using actually energy to cool them versus water. So now there's always the pros and cons to both. So from a utility standpoint, we're watching it to be proactive, and so that we'll know what was the best way to respond if and when it gets here.
Yeah, we're also just watching it right now. It's one of my projects. We'll be coming out with a report on our recommendations for the legislature and for TCEQ sometime probably in the summer after we get everything ready. But right now it's really just watching what's happening. I imagine it's the same process. If it's a city that's giving them a permit or a utility giving them the permit, it would be the same thing, public comment, showing up at meetings, contesting it. If it's a state giving the water permit, same process. It's the public comment, contesting all of that. But I think it's going to be a very hot topic at the legislature. I think there's going to be a lot of momentum from both sides of the aisle to have guardrails in place on the energy side and the water side, so I would not be surprised to see stuff come out. But again, unfortunately, the legislature doesn't meet till January of 2027. So our goal is to just, probably y'all's too, to have information, understand the state of play, and see what's happening and how we can respond.
And you asked how to get involved, because one thing that we're learning, because they are so new to our area, are zoning, because the public has input on zoning. Right now, we don't have, we being collectively as a state in our area, the zoning, we don't have the appropriate zoning for those data centers, which is creating just another level of challenge to it. But that would be a way that for the public to be involved, because you have input on zoning.
There are no other questions, maybe one more.
I've heard anecdotally, I guess, that TCEQ basically looks at a permit, and if you filled it out correctly, it's a done deal. I'm curious if you know statistically how many of those get denied, if ever.
I don't know. I know people who would have a pretty good sense. Again, our executive director and our technical director, they're the ones who do the permits in our office. So they are deeply involved and deeply knowledgeable about the permitting system. I doubt it's often that they actually deny the permit, because they don't, until the legislature increases the requirements, if you have filled out the permit and met all of the requirements, they don't have grounds to deny. And so a lot of what we deal with in the policy side of the office is that you go to the legislature and you say, hey, there's this issue, and they say, well, TCEQ should regulate it. And we go to TCEQ and we say, hey, can you regulate it? They're like, the legislature needs to tell us to do it through law. And then you go back to they say, hey, you need to do a law to tell TCEQ to do this. And they're like, oh, well, that should be a TCEQ thing. They should just do it. And you never get anywhere. And so again, it just gets back to my same soapbox of until the legislators hear from their constituents that they want to see TCEQ do this or be more strict or deny more permits, which again, if they meet all the requirements, it's not. So it's really gonna have to be raise the requirements, make them more strict before they can start denying them.
Okay. So is the background on all of this basically that development means more tax dollars for somebody, and developers contribute well to political races?
I do not want to get but I will say, the Texas economic miracle has its many positive and many negative impacts. So.
All right, folks, I think we can maybe give one more round of applause for Suzanne and Rachel. Yeah, if anybody would like to review this talk, it's going to be on our YouTube channel, and we're really grateful that y'all came out tonight. Thank you. Thank you so much.